At least the money's good. Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 worst jobs that actually pay well. Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. For this list, we're looking at occupations that are dangerous or unpleasant in some way, but still pay a decent amount. We'll be basing this list on how unpleasant the job is, while taking the paycheck into account.
You think the odds of you getting off this rig alive are if you don't jump with me right now? I'm getting off this rig. You hear me? You want to stay here? You stay here.
Number 10. Dog food taster. Yep, this is actually a thing. No one really stops to think about the actual taste of that canned or bagged food we bring home for our fur babies. Someone has to test it, right? While dog food is usually made from perfectly normal ingredients like chicken, rice, corn, and others, the idea of putting dry pellets or that wet canned mess in our mouths is just about enough to make our stomachs turn. Regardless, it is an employment opportunity. And hey, you're not actually expected to swallow it, just to see if it smells and tastes good. For an average annual salary of $30,000 to $75,000 a year, we might just consider grabbing our forks.
Needs a little salt.
Number 9. Golf ball diver. It's a fact, lots of people spend a lot of money on golf. The small white balls are designed to be hit long distances, but far too many fail to reach their intended destination. When it becomes too messy or inconvenient to retrieve them, it's the player's loss, but it could be your gain. Those brave enough to retrieve those countless misplaced balls and resell them can make quite a bit of money, especially if they don't mind the unsafe terrain, needle in a haystack style work, and other possible swamp residents. $100,000 would certainly cover a couple of very close calls.
You never know what you're going to find in a water hazard. How about that?
Number 8. Tollbooth Operator. Do you like small spaces and minimal human interaction? Would you like an annual average salary of $45,000 and a likely secure union job with plenty of paid time off? Well, then working in a toll booth might be for you.
Now you either pay the $3 or you go back inside and you get an additional sticker.
The downside is that the workspace is beyond small and that you'll be handling money from thousands of people a day. And it's not exactly the cleanest thing on the planet. Still, this might be a great fit for an introvert and those who like to spend their time alone, or who find themselves content with repetitive tasks.
Has anybody got a dime?
Number 7. Crop duster pilot. Not everyone who learns how to fly a plane yearns to be above the clouds. Crop dusters, for example, are actually masters of piloting as close to the ground as possible on a fairly regular basis. It might sound like a humble occupation, but it takes guts. You have to watch out for power lines and other obstacles, not to mention deal with exposure to pesticides and other chemicals. Depending on your availability, you may even find yourself helping with putting out a wildfire or two when needed. Sure, it's seasonal and not nearly as glamorous as those fancy pilot uniforms, but up to $100,000 a year ain't bad either.
Year-round employment, great paycheck. Are you with me?
Yeah, I'm way ahead of you.
Number 6. Oil rig worker. Out in the middle of the ocean, working on a freestanding piece of metal, pumping a flammable liquid for others to use. The danger of this job is readily apparent in the description. And if those conditions aren't enough to scare you off, you might want to consider being away from your family for long periods and getting really, really dirty.
I've been working out here for 6 years, and it kind of makes things difficult to maintain relationships, even with friends.
Yeah, you could buy a lot of soap for $100,000 a year, but that doesn't really help with all the other factors. Not to mention that when you're isolated out in the ocean, help can sometimes be far off, regardless of how serious the emergency. Number 5. Proctologist. To say the medical profession is full of health risks and uncomfortable situations is an understatement. The world of doctors and nurses has plenty of unpleasant jobs to pick from, especially if you're on the squeamish side.
If you're going to succeed, you got to start at the bottom and work your way up.
However, our pick ultimately had to go to proctologists, for all the obvious reasons. Sure, these colorectal specialists can make upwards of $300,000 a year, but we should hope so, considering their job is literally to work with the mechanisms of human beings' waste disposal. We're not even going to get into the years of schooling and high cost of tuition it takes to get to that point.
Ass man. Yeah, he's the ass man. Jerry, he's the ass man.
Number 4. Urine Farmer. Yes, this is a real job. And yes, they can make upwards of $80,000 a year. What exactly does a urine farmer do, you ask? Well, for one, they generally raise deer, but could technically deal with any number of different types of animals, as long as the urine is desirable for hunters.
This is not by any chance your everyday chemical pesticide or fertilizer. This is rabbit urine.
While raising the animals, the farmers collect their waste in separate containers below their pens. Then this urine is bottled up and sold to hunters for a pretty penny, who will use it to lure prey into the range of their traps and hunting sites.
Hey, Dad, got you some more piss jugs?
Oh, excellent, Bo. You're right on, man.
All in all, it's actually a pretty ingenious idea, if more than a little gross and odd. Number 3, sewer inspector. Another job dealing with human waste? There might be a pattern here. Sewer inspectors, however, don't just deal with the waste. They also deal with the infrastructure used to dispose of lots of it. While their average take-home is a nice $55,000 a year, they have to inspect the pipes and sewers carrying all our filth to get it. Bacteria, the odor, not to mention the vermin that live and thrive in such areas. There's a lot to contend with down there. Sure, there's no chance of coming across Pennywise in real life, but the rats, bugs, and waste are surely enough to inspire plenty of nightmares. Number 2, Embalmer. Preparing the bodies of the recently deceased for funerals is another job that allows you to enjoy peace and quiet with few coworkers or customers. For this job, however, you'll need a strong stomach and, depending on your place of employment, perhaps even some skill with makeup. Worst of all, you'll be exposed to intense chemicals, which have been linked to cancer among other diseases. And we imagine that you'll be expected to piece together some not too pretty faces depending on the cause of death. But at the end of the day, it pays up to $58,000 for largely solitary work where your subject can't really complain. And hey, somebody's got to do it. Number 1, crime scene cleaner. There are plenty of shows about those who investigate crimes, but the real money is made by those who clean up after all the detectives and police have left. Crime scene cleanup involves harsh chemicals to clean up what dead bodies leave behind, and that includes blood, waste, and flesh. There's always a huge amount of risk for disease when dealing with human detritus, in particular blood. Not to mention the strange hours you'll likely have to keep, since crime can obviously happen at any time of day.
You need to go in the back seat, scoop up all those little pieces of brain and skull, get it out of there.
Still, coming home with roughly $80,000 a year might actually make this job worth it, if you've got the stomach for it.
I got a threshold, Jules. I got a threshold for the abuse that I will take.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out these other great clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.